When you sign a legal contract today, the terms are effectively locked. Once a document is notarized, neither party can unilaterally cross out clauses or write in new rules. To do so would simply void the entire agreement. Yet, a common assumption about the Bible is that God did exactly that, establishing a promise of salvation by faith, only to later add a heavy, complex rulebook that changed the requirements for his people. To see why that's a legal impossibility, we have to look at how the contract was first signed. Genesis 15 records the specific moment God formalized his agreement with Abraham. It was a moment designed to settle, once and for all, the question of who was responsible for the inheritance. In the ancient Near East, you didn't seal a covenant with a signature, you sealed it with a blade. Both parties would cut sacrificial animals in half, laying the pieces in 2 rows. They would then walk together through the path between the halves, essentially swearing that they would rather be torn asunder than break their word. But as the sun goes down, Abram never walks through those pieces. He simply watches. God alone, appearing as a smoking furnace and a burning lamp, passes between the severed animals. By passing through the pieces alone, God took the entire weight of the contract upon himself. Abram had nothing to sign and no performance to guarantee. His role was simply to believe the word of the one who walked. 430 years later, the scene shifts to the base of Mount Sinai. Here, God delivers the law to Moses, a massive collection of commandments, civil codes, and ritual sacrifices. This creates a conflict. Did God change the terms? Did the arrival of the law turn an unconditional promise into a contract dependent on human rule following? The Apostle Paul uses a legal argument in Galatians 3 to address this. He points out that if a human contract cannot be set aside or amended once it is ratified, then a covenant confirmed by God cannot be annulled by a law that arrived 4 centuries later. The law functioned as an addendum, added because of transgressions. It was a temporary measure designed to guide a nation of millions until the arrival of the true heir. The law could not replace the promise, because the promise was the foundation. The regulations at Sinai were a physical framework built on top of a spiritual guarantee that had already been locked in. There is, however, a paradox in the original language of the contract. In Genesis 17, God promises that Abraham and his descendants will inherit the land and the blessing forever. But Abraham died thousands of years ago. A dead man cannot hold an everlasting claim to land. The only way for the contract to remain valid is through the resurrection of the dead. For the promise to be everlasting, the recipient must be made eternal. Paul highlights a specific detail in the text. The promise was not made to Abraham's seeds, plural, but to his seed, singular. That singular heir is Jesus Christ. Jesus was the intended recipient who fulfilled every requirement of the ritual laws. By acting as both the high priest and a final sacrifice, he secured the eternal inheritance that the contract demanded. The new covenant is the continuation of the original promise made to Abraham, finally activated in full by the arrival of Christ. We are included in this ancient agreement through a process Paul calls grafting. When a person receives God's Spirit, they are legally joined to this contract as joint heirs with Christ. This is why the earthly priesthood and animal sacrifices of the Sinai era are no longer necessary. Under this activated covenant, the law is internalized, written on the heart rather than on stone. While true belief results in a life of obedience, that obedience isn't the payment for the inheritance. The foundation of the contract remains exactly what it was in the beginning: faith in the one who made the promise. Revelation 21:7 describes the final fulfillment of this agreement, where God establishes his kingdom and his people inherit all things. This is the moment the unchangeable promise becomes a visible reality. In a world of broken words and changing terms, this contract remains intact. Our hope does not rest on our ability to perform perfectly, but on God's faithfulness to the oath he swore to himself.